time.
Thank you. Mr. Knott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Witnesses, thank you for being here. Before I ask any questions, let me state from a first-person perspective that I had the privilege of serving under both the Biden and the Trump administrations. I was a federal prosecutor who focused exclusively on organized crime. And the idea that both administrations were committed to applying the law as it relates to both organized crime and specifically how illegal immigration infested organized crime is laughable. It's demonstrably not true. On day one of the Biden's Department of Justice in 2021, prosecutors that I worked with who had been exclusively assigned to prosecuting illegal reentries and immigration offenses, those individuals were either reassigned or let go. Many of them are no longer with the Department of Justice. And this tracks when you look at the number of illegal reentries. So these are people who were removed after having been convicted of a crime and then come back a second time. The number of those prosecutions, the number of those sentences and convictions decreased precipitously under the Biden administration, despite millions and millions more illegal crossers. Secondly, this bureaucratic and administrative effect that I saw from the prosecutor side, it applied equally to the law enforcement side. I'm sure you know, sir, from your contact with the Border Patrol, with DEA, with ATF, and other federal law enforcement, that these bureaucratic hurdles made it very difficult to investigate, to prosecute, to even submit cases that dealt with illegal immigration. For whatever reason, it was flatly deprioritized in terms of a law enforcement mechanism, that the Department of Justice was unable to bring these cases to the grand jury to charge them and to work them over the last 4 years. Now, I want to go and ask a few questions. Ms. Vaughn, you've specifically mentioned just now that there was very little disincentivizing illegal immigration. Can you expand on that, just broadly speaking? Were there any disincentives to any person who wanted to cross illegally into the United States over the last 4 years?
No, people understood that if they could make it to the U.S. border, that they almost certainly were going to be released into the country, possibly issued a work permit, and would not expect any threat of removal or consequences for their illegal entry for the foreseeable future.
Mr. Newman, were there any disincentives that you saw over the last 4 years implemented by the Biden administration specifically to disincentivize illegal immigration?
No, not many at all. As Jessica just mentioned, Mrs. Vaughn just mentioned, the getting parole, like those are obvious incentives to coming in, but also, as was mentioned before, deprioritizing illegal immigration crimes meant people knew they could just come in and basically vanish into the country, and they did. That's why we have more illegal aliens in the country now than we did 4 years ago.
And isn't it true, sir, that the border does have vast swaths of the mileage that were unsupervised by order by the Border Patrol, and that emanated from Washington, obviously, but it was implemented with huge holes in the border?
Yes.
And so therefore, it's entirely foreseeable that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions potentially, could have come across the border without contact.
Yes.
Ms. Vaughn, I want to talk to you about how the cartels exploited these loopholes. Over the last 4 years, the price of drugs, in many respects, have gone down precipitously. That's an increase of supply. I saw this in my job. How have cartels exploited the open border of the last 4 years?
Well, they've reaped enormous revenue from it, something like $13 billion a year.
That's just known, by the way.
Right.
Yes.
They have enticed migrants because they could confidently assure their customers that they would succeed in getting into the U.S. And then often they hooked them up with jobs and told them that they would have to pay off the remainder of their smuggling fee by giving back some of the wages that they were earning, all determined by the cartel, pay for housing, transportation, food, all kinds of other expenses they have in what was a debt bondage or labor trafficking situation. That's how they took advantage of these people.
And that's still going on right now?
Oh, absolutely.
That infrastructure's in place?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And that leads to more or less dangerous crime?
Oh, more more and more.
More or
crime.
less gang violence.
One of the ways that they can get people to pay off their debt is to
Yes.
participate in drug trafficking.
More or less overdose deaths.
More.
And sir, briefly, can you describe the impact on local, non-federal law enforcement that these open border policies have had?
It's made it so it's very hard for local law enforcement to respond to anything. They're focused on so many more additional crimes. When the Cato Institute says that illegal immigrants commit half less than U.S. citizens, it doesn't matter how much they're committing. It's adding to what local law enforcement has to respond to.
Right.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Onder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.